And welcome you all here in the INSA house. Thank you for coming, especially we're happy. Yeah, Mr. Speck will join. It's the third time we see each other, and the first time we present. Topic is the strategic partnership between Poland and Germany crucial for the security of Central and Eastern Europe. I think that's a good summary for our two last sessions we had. We're happy that we are here together, have this interesting talk just about us again. We're from the Institute for Research Answers, INSA, and we conduct political surveys. We're actually common for that. To you.
Well, thank you so much. I represent the Polish partners here, Nowa Konfederacja. We would like to also thank the Foundation for Polish-German Cooperation, which sponsored our series of seminars, co-sponsored. Today, we're meeting, we've already discussed the bilateral relations between Poland and Germany, energy security, with a focus on energy security, with a focus on economic relations. Now we're looking at security. We have one of the preeminent security experts when it comes to Central Eastern Europe, one of my favorite columnists from one of my favorite German newspapers, German language newspaper, which is Neue Zürcher Zeitung, Dr. Ulrich Speck with us. We have Dr. Justyna Schulz from the Western Institute, economist, German expert with a degree from the University of Warsaw. The Western Institute is a very established, historically established analytical center that deals predominantly with Polish-German relations. We also have with us Robert Kuraszkiewicz, Polish politician, manager, entrepreneur, publicist, activist of democratic opposition, former president of Bank Pocztowy, the Postbank in Poland in years 2029-2020, and one of the spiritus movens, if I may say so, one of the supporters and members of the editorial staff of Nowa Konfederacja. Of course, you know, Ruben Binkert started, he's a manager at INSA, specializing in social psychology research. We also have Simon Binkert, who's an assistant to the manager of INSA Austria. And right now, perfect timing, Jacek. Online joining us, we have Dr. Jacek Rosa. Dr. Rosa is my old-time favorite professional diplomat with over 20 years of experience specializing in economy, security, and energy. He worked in Germany, Switzerland, Liechtenstein. I met him when I worked for the Polish Embassy in Berlin. And he currently handles economic affairs at the Polish Embassy in Dublin. And I'm Michał, I'm a analyst, doctor of political science. I work at Lazarski University. I'm also a senior specialist at the National Security Bureau, which is a institution that advises the president on security issues in Poland. So today, of course, we have, as you can see, a very interesting array of guests, and probably this will make for a very interesting discussion, which will be recorded, which will be made available to the followers of Nowa Konfederacja and INSA online. So, you know, I need to note that this is not Chatham House, so we might be a bit more circumspect. Having said this, what we have planned as the first part of our today's seminar are short keynote addresses by our guest, Dr. Ulrich Speck, and myself. Good. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the invitation. Glad to be here. I have to admit, first, I'm in the airport. I'm not even in the airport in the center, but I'm close to airport. It's great to be here. And I think it's important to look at the Polish-German relationship not only as a psychological exercise, and I've participated in some of these where what you think about the other and how do we, come to a joint view of our relationship. I think that's important, but we also need to see the bigger picture, namely after the full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine. So the question of this seminar is the strategic partnership between Poland and Germany crucial for the security of Central and Eastern Europe? And my short answer is yes. And for my long answer, I want to look at a bit at the broader context. So I mentioned already the Russian full-scale invasion in Ukraine. And I think we can say this is now at the top of the European agenda. So security moved up. Unlike before, where we were looking more about the economy, energy, other issues, but it has really become a major issue in all countries in Europe. Meanwhile, before February 22, there was a big divide between Germany and Poland with regard to security, thinking about security, threat perception. Obviously, Poland was far more concerned about Russia. Also, after 2014-15, even after 2008, the invasion of Georgia, and the German side didn't share this threat perception, looked differently at Russia and at still what we can call now the Russia policy, which was kind of accommodating Russia and trying to find common ground. But I think since the full-scale invasion, Germany has dramatically changed. And we see, we have the speech Zeitenwende, but we also have military Zeitenwende. We have the serious effort of rearming in Germany. Of course, there's a big debate. Are we preparing for the right war? What are the lessons from Ukraine? So on and so forth. But the train has left the station, and we are now on the path of rearming. The ambition is to become one of the biggest, if not the biggest, conventional army. I recently saw that this is also the Polish view that Poland is on the path of becoming the biggest conventional army. Maybe you can meet, and maybe we can share this ambition. That's at least my hope. We also see, for those who are skeptical whether Germany really has changed, I think support for Ukraine is another proof for the fact that Germany has changed its views of Russia and the East. The German defense minister, Pistorius, just visited the front in Ukraine. The new head of BND, the intelligence service, was also just in Ukraine. He is a former Ukrainian ambassador, so he went straight from Kiev to heading the intelligence in Germany, the BND. There's plenty of military cooperation. There are plenty of startups, especially around Munich, who work on drones. There is the joint deep strike project with Ukraine. I think we see Zeitenwende is becoming real with regard to military affairs and support of Ukraine. But at the same time, we see there is a new big uncertainty about NATO, about the transatlantic alliance. After the Russian full-scale invasion, we had a moment when the America still played its old role, the role that it played during the Cold War with Joe Biden, who formative experience has been the Cold War. He was the first time in Moscow in the 1970s. In the 1980s, he was very much engaged as a member of Congress. So what we saw that was that the US was taking over its old NATO role, and the Europeans were just happy to see America taking on that leadership. And so it looked like we could just start where we had left off at the end of the Cold War. It was kind of repetition of the old framework. But then there came Trump, of course. And Trump first, we remember all Trump in his first time when he was president, talked a lot of, NATO is becoming indispensable. And there was a sense that he would come back and maybe, tell the Europeans that NATO is over. We had also one visit of Stoltenberg in Washington a few weeks ago when everybody was, suspicious whether Trump would just tell Stoltenberg that it's more or less over. At least this was in some quarters there was this fear. But in that regard, I think Trump too has made his peace with NATO largely. We saw it, for example, in the national security strategy, where he praised NATO in his personal foreword, one page. NATO played a prominent role, and he praised himself for having pushed NATO to rearm and to get serious on defense. So this looked okay. What didn't look great was his efforts to make peace in Ukraine, but still there was a sense that the US hasn't moved to the Russian side as some people had suggested. But then I think what really became a big problem in the transatlantic relationship was Greenland, and this talk of annexing Greenland. That was, I would call it the Greenland shock even. Certainly in Northern Europe, in countries like Denmark, of course, but also all over Europe. So the image of the US, I would say, hasn't fully changed, but at least for some people, it became something like not an enemy, but a possible enemy. And there was talk about, I think it was very much exaggerated, but it created this fantasy that Europeans have to defend Greenland against the US. I think this can be kind of contained because there's also enough people in Washington who think this is a pretty bad idea. People like Rubio and certainly Congress. But this has, I think, triggered new thinking about security in Europe. So where are we now with regard to the broader views of the future of European security? I think we have now three competing frameworks, how this could turn out. We have, on one hand, the view of a Europeanized NATO. Pentagon strategist Rich Colby calls it NATO 3.0. And we see this also as being something that on the European side is very much pushed to Europeanize NATO And both sides actually agree about the need for Europe to take a much bigger role in defense and deterrence. Europe is taking over the bulk of conventional defense, and the US is providing nuclear deterrence, some military support, maybe enablers, but also, I think, leadership, which is not even indispensable. So that would be one framework. We continue with NATO, and we also have to remember that NATO, during the Cold War, was never a love affair. And there were plenty of moments of transatlantic discontent and anger, but somehow both sides have always found back together. And we can imagine that this is going to continue, especially after Trump, when the broader view also on the Republican side is again dominant in the US, that NATO is important, it is vital for the US as well. So there's I would say, a good chance that NATO will survive, but it requires a change in burden sharing. Europeans doing far more. That is the condition. But that would be one scenario. But we hear, and I was just 1 week in Washington, and I heard a lot of views of transatlantic relationship, and I'm one of the people who are arguing here that NATO is going to survive because of joint interests, because the West is important as a unity at a time where we have Russia and China working more closely together. But what I hear is on the left and on the right, there's plenty of doubt, also on the US side, where is our country going? And what is the future of our foreign policy? So there are the restrainers on the right and the restrainers on the left. And there are, of course, also those who think that in times of competition with China, the US cannot provide Europe with security anymore, at least not at the same level. So things are changing, and we may not return to a Biden era. Biden was kind of unique because he was, if you want, a dinosaur from the Cold War. And the next American president will have other priorities than him. It doesn't mean that NATO cannot remain among the main priorities of the US, but there's at least a question mark. So there's a lot of doubt, and I think in January, the Greenland shock has made these doubts stronger. So what we see now is that the second framework is coming into fashion, which is European strategic autonomy or sovereignty, and this has been pushed very much by Macron for years. But with the Greenland crisis, this camp within the EU has gained momentum. So we see, for example, also in Germany, important voices starting to think more loudly about strategic autonomy as a framework. I want to quote Claudia Major from the German Marshall Fund. She wrote last week an op-ed in the New York Times, where she said that these United States are acting against Europe, taking the example of the Greenland crisis. She said Europe is now quietly beginning to map out what deterrence and defense might look like with limited or entirely without US assistance. And we also saw last week a new report coming out from the Kiel Institute for World Economy, which was arguing that European defense autonomy is technologically feasible, fiscally viable, and politically achievable. And people working on that paper are, for example, Moritz Schullerich, Nico Lange, who worked for the Defense Ministry, Eleni Obermann, and Thomas Enders, both from Airbus or former Airbus. So there's a very serious thinking going into this, what I would call strategic autonomy scenario. That the authors say Of course, this cannot be implemented overnight, but significant progress towards European sovereignty could be achieved within 3 to 5 years, and a high degree of autonomy within 5 to 10 years. So this is now, I think, strategic autonomy is not a French thing anymore. It is widely discussed, and if I understand well, also in Poland, it's gaining momentum. To me, the major question about strategic autonomy is not so much whether it's technically feasible, whether it can be achieved in terms of having, the weapons and the ammunition and the organization in place. To me, the question is rather whether there can be a united European leadership, because even if it's not a European army, even if it's several armies coordinating, cooperating, you still need a center that declares war, that leads on all these issues. And if we look at every month almost at the European Council meetings, we see that European leaders, if they sit together, they don't get too much done, especially not when it comes to difficult geopolitical matters. So, for example, we saw the effort to use Russian frozen assets. That effort went nowhere. We saw that Hungary could block important decisions for months and months. So if you think about a warlike situation where fast decision making is needed, and where you have to have a unity, a center that decides what to do and next, at least with the current arrangement, it's hard to see how Europe could be the main actor for European security in the sense of a collective actor. Also, a big question, of course, in that setup would be whether Western Europeans would actually go to war against Russia if Russia would attack the eastern flank. Put it, to go directly to the point. So, if you live in Italy, Spain, and even France, Russia looks far less threatening than if you live in Finland, Estonia, Poland, or Romania. So the threat perception is still widely different in Western Europe and in the Eastern flank countries. One other aspect is that in such an arrangement, France would probably get a very powerful role because it has the nuclear deterrence. And then we would face the question over the balance inside Europe, because France would certainly expect something in return for providing nuclear deterrence. So the balance between Germany and France would also be put into question. So what would France expect, and what are countries ready to give? So I think if we look closer at the European autonomies, the strategic autonomy, sovereignty scenario, there are plenty of questions, and it's far less. There are far more problems than just on the technical side, which is where all these reports are about, how to achieve all the capabilities that we need, how to replace the American capabilities and build this up. So this is not just a technical exercise; it would be a political exercise, and I don't see us really being on the path towards that. So we have Plan A, which is NATO, with question marks also on the American side. We have Plan B, which is the European strategic autonomy, which is also where we also see many question marks. And then I would say something is emerging that could be called Plan C, which I call the Nordic Eastern Alliance or coalition. So this is not something that is yet broadly discussed. I saw Edward Lucas writing about it recently, and it emerges as a response to problems with Plan A and Plan B, NATO, EU, or European strategic autonomy. So the question is, what countries would be ready to fight back or push back if Russia would do something on the Eastern attack? Let's call it attack, but of course we all have in mind different scenarios. It could be something in the gray zone, it could be a full-scale attack. But there are countries who share exactly. There are so many scenarios now. And if you look at the countries who are really concerned about Russia and see it as an existential threat, you come up with certainly Poland as one of the key countries. The Baltic countries, we see also Finland. Further south, I would also include Romania, which is far more passive, but it's obviously has a strong interest in putting back. But then we also see the northern countries. So if Finland is part of this, Sweden sees obviously immediately its own national security threatened. And we have Denmark. And in a way, those countries are the literal states of the Baltic Sea. In a way, that's the space I see as the most clearly opposed to Russian territorial expansion. And of course, those countries. Let's imagine something happens, NATO will not come, and the EU will not come, or the European sovereignty scenario will not materialize, not be ready. Then you see in an ad hoc scenario, those countries would probably come to each other's support. So the Poles would probably come to the support of the Baltic countries one way or the other. And then we see what is emerging are the contours of this Nordic Eastern coalition. And there are already some formats. Lucas pointed out the Joint Expeditionary Force, GEF, which is led by the UK. So he sees the UK pretty much as a backup power or even a leader in this arrangement. And he also thinks Germany would be part of that, which I also believe it would and it should. So if we take all those countries with their capabilities and their determination, I think this could be not a perfect solution, far from it, but it's far more than just one country defending itself. So there is something like a collective a group of countries. And this could also be kind of more formalized, but I wouldn't say in an alliance, but people have the joint understanding that we are at the center of all this, and we have to cooperate. They could build more coherence among themselves. For example, Germany now is pretty much focused on France, so for Merz, finding agreement with Macron is the number one concern. And I think, if we think more in those scenarios and future security of Europe, then I think the German-Polish relationship should really be at the center. So I don't advise anybody to come out with a big plan. Certainly not as long as there's NATO, which I still think has a future, but we should keep this in mind as one of the scenarios in which we may have to face or build our reaction to Russian aggression. And on the other side, it would be also helpful to let Russia know that these countries have a tacit joint understanding that Russia needs to expect to face not only one of us, but a number of countries. So that's where my thinking is on Polish-German relations, because in all those scenarios, the German-Polish relationship is important, but it will be key in this third scenario of a Nordic Eastern coalition or alliance. And so if we can build more quietly in this area, in this kind of thinking, I think it would strengthen our capabilities and our deterrence. And so that's the way, in my view, that would be the way ahead.
So, if I may, so just one question, just to be clarifying everything in my mind. You see the Germany as part of this Nordic alliance?
Yeah, I see this. I see Britain and Germany, we call them backup powers. In a way, similar. I mean, on the one hand, Germany will be involved because it has its own brigade in Lithuania, which is a game changer in my view, because we are now a frontline. We're not a frontline state, but we're positioned in the frontline state. So you had a direct threat to German soldiers. This changes a lot. So that's point one. On the other hand, I think what Germany's role would be, for sure, is Germany could and should provide its industrial capacities to build the weapons ammunition. We see Germany is building this up. We see car companies now competing for contracts to work to produce weapons. And in my view, Germany should have a kind of contingency plan where it can quickly scale up production of all those military goods, as we see now in this war in Ukraine. What matters is numbers, size, not always sophistication. And so Germany in that scenario would be called the arsenal of democracy, to remind us of the Second World War, when the US wasn't involved directly yet, but provided Britain and other countries with military material, which is in such a war of attrition crucial. I don't want to advocate a division of labor, frontlines fight and the others, but everything we can get, I think, is helpful. And let's see where this country is evolving. But I think this industrial support is something that Germany would easily give. Entering a full-scale war with Russia, it's a big step. It's a big step. Even if I think that Germany has very much changed, but I'm sure we're going to discuss this later on.
No, I do think it is a big step, and thank you for that. Very interesting lectures. As usually, no, this is why I like your analysis. I like your article. It starts, very commonsensical, and then you get into something that actually makes you think, that is actually thinking out of the box. So thank you for that, especially in this concept of Nordic Eastern Alliance. Well, I must say, when I was preparing my short keynote address, I had a scenario in mind we should prepare for, not because it's the most likely security threat scenario for us, both Poland, Germany, and generally NATO members, not because it's the most likely, but because out of those scenarios which are somewhat probable, this is the worst case. And prudence in security demands that you prepare for the worst case scenario out of those scenarios that seem somewhat probable. Of course, you cannot prepare for real black swans. That's not doable. But you should always hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And the worst case scenario has been somewhat outlined in the new national defense strategy, which I think, however, there are points of criticism of that document. The War Department gets now criticized a lot. Nevertheless, I do think it's a very interesting document. The American National Defense Strategy. The American National Defense Strategy. I do think that it's a very, very insightful document by the Pentagon. And this worst case scenario would be a clash of the West, meaning US, NATO, and US, and the Asian allies of the United States in a global conflict with a bloc that another analyst, Ms. Verena Chakarova, calls the dragon bears. This would be the Chinese-Russian alliance aided by North Korea and Iran. And such a global conflict could happen simultaneously in three theaters: Pacific, Middle East, and Eastern Europe. And what national defense strategy of the United States calls for is for US allies to be prepared to tackle the imminent danger within their area independently, to be able to withstand the first blow, basically. Which would mean that US and its eastern allies, of course, would need to stop China in the Pacific. That Israel would need to stop Iran in the Middle East, which is, which is doable, to say the least. And the NATO's eastern bloc would need to stop a possible Russian aggression. And this might be actually one of the weakest parts, one of the weakest links in that security architecture. Of course, right now we have a meeting with President Trump at KSIŁ. They are working very hard to close what seems to be put an end to what seems to be two proxy wars, one in Ukraine, the other one in Iran. But it remains to be seen how stable, how enduring the solutions they propose after that meeting will be. That possibility of a new global conflict, of a new world war, is still looming somewhere in the background. And when it comes to Europe, according to different estimates, it will need 6 to 10 years to be able to to be conventionally independent from direct US support, and only deal with the American nuclear umbrella. This is something that most analysts still assume to be necessary. We also do not exactly know when and with what means this new global conflict could take place, but some analysts, for instance, Professor Grajewski, but not only him, point out that, I just said that we might need 6 to 10 years to get ready, but some analysts point out that already the years 2027, 2030, 2031 might be decisive, might be very important. So this leaves you with a very troubled conclusion that we need a lot of time to get ready, and we might not have that time. Why 2030? And not to say that those are the years when World War III will start. I'm not trying to be catastrophic here, but this is the moment when the dragon bear might start testing NATO's resolve very aggressively. for a couple of reasons. Firstly, this is the moment when we might have completely new governments in key Western countries. So that period between 2027 and 2029, basically. 2027, we'll have presidential elections in France with Rassemblement National really running strong and a high probability that Mr. Bardella will become the next president of the Republic. We also have parliamentary elections in Poland the very same year. In 2028, we will have presidential elections in the United States, and in 2029, with all probability, we will have parliamentary elections, Bundestag in Germany, with again, a party that has never been in a coalition before, being right now the preeminent political force, AfD force, as the first political force in Germany. And whatever our political sympathies are, if you look at this from the point of view of our geostrategic foes, and that may be a good moment to test them, to test the new people, yes, to see how they do, especially given that they have different, sometimes conflicting ideas about geopolitics, about foreign politics. I always tell my Polish friends who also complain about Trump, I'm telling them, listen, Trump is an old story. We know how he operates. We know what are the dangers. We basically realize what the geopolitical or foreign policy issues we might have under President Trump. What are our strong suits in relations with him? President NOWOŚCI seems to have a rather good relation with President Trump. What are some of the problems we might face? But think ahead. Don't fight the battles we fought yesterday. Fight the battles we might fight in the future. Think about what might happen after 2029 when we have someone like Gavin Newsom, a model transatlantic president in the US. But then in Germany we'll have Chancellor Biden or Chancellor Ruben. What do we do? What do we do then? And we might have a whole different set of problems, especially with Gino Kupala, because obviously there is already some quiet talk about the Grand Mauer collapsing, and if it collapses, the party that polls first, the party that has the best results, traditionally becomes the chancellor. There are only two coalitions possible, as INSA, your institute, points out in its report. It's either right now, it's either Jamaica, everyone, or it's blue-black. So AfD and Union. So those are real probabilities we need to realize. And it's not simply because of evil will that those governments might be tested. They simply might be tested because new governments, new parties that have never been in power before, that have no ideas, are tested by their foreign enemies by default. At the same time, the big man of the East, which is Putin and Xi, by 2030, will already become with all likelihood painfully aware that no one ever lives forever. And getting old, by the evolution. And they need to settle all scores while they still are capable of doing this, especially with Xi. I can see how Xi looks at those younger, more technocratic leaders in the Communist Party. He thinks, no, I need to make China great before I hand it over to them. They don't think in the same way I do. Now, although the period 2027-2030 may be a perfect moment for the Dragon Bird to test the collectiveness of the West, this may take, as we said, this may come in different shapes and sizes. For instance, Russia taking over Gotland, which is uninhabited, and is Swedish territory, or instigating a armed rebellion in the Nowa region in Estonia, another possible scenario, or demanding an extraterritorial corridor connecting Kaliningrad region with mainland Russia. Different scenarios are possible, and even a diplomatic solution to a conflict in Ukraine should not lull us into complacency, so make us complacent. Especially given that Putin, just like Stalin, just like other Russian leaders, is not thrilled at all with the perspective of seeing battle-hardened troops that might have strange ideas in their heads returning home. Already, statistics talk about hundreds of people who were killed simply, or brutalized or killed by troops returning home simply because they were left unattended, and those soldiers seem to have problems. The solutions that former Russian establishment used to deal with the returning soldier phenomenon were either large-scale repressions and imprisonments, sending men to penal colonies, this is what Stalin did, or another war. Also, Stalin would know after, if you look at the Winter War, then it's a sort of continuation there. Now, we do not know when this hypothetical big conflict would happen. What we do know is that in Europe, a lot will depend on the level of cooperation between two countries. Germany, the largest economy, the powerhouse of the European Union, and Poland, the largest army of the Eastern Flank, and the largest country of the Eastern Flank. And I've, just to finish very briefly, I've made 7 points, 7 proposals for a good Polish-German cooperation and security. And with those points, I will conclude. Firstly, we need to understand that we need to understand our motives, and we need to understand that some of the things both Poland and Germany is doing in international relations and security is not necessarily done in order to intimidate the other side, or is done with a vested motive to act against the other side. Poland needs to understand the motives behind German plans to build a very large and capable army, to use different mechanisms to achieve that. Germany needs to understand why Poland is so interested in building regional cooperation and strong bilateral ties with the US. Second, we can and should bury historical hatchets. So that's there. There are many voices in different political parties which claim that the whole war reparation debate could be brought to a conclusion if both countries would engage on a common mode, a common project of reinforcing the defense capabilities of NATO's Eastern Flank. I remember Wolfgang Ischinger, the former ambassador, the former German ambassador to US, and of course, long-time chairman of the Munich Security Conference, voicing that idea, but it wasn't really something that the major political forces thought about seriously. Third, we need to give the benefit of the doubt even to the political forces we do not trust or like. And I think that Germany should, I think that Polish political parties should not necessarily vilify the German right and use strong historical analogies when speaking about German history, let's put it that way. But on the flip side, and this is something that I remember very well in my times when I was working in Germany. Germany should refrain from using its influence in EU to make life miserable for a right-wing government in Poland, even a government which would be peace and Konfederacja, because this might be the next government after the election. Now, I clearly remember that when I was working in Berlin, whenever I talked about problems in Polish-German relations, what I typically heard from German establishment was, oh, this is just peace, and this is just because peace is so anti-German. When we have another government, everything will be fine. So this is the type of attitude that makes you want to do everything you can, even things that should not be done between allies, to make that bad government you don't like go away. And I see that tendency in Germany. I might also see it in Poland. We should refrain from this, even if we have governments we do not like. Let me just give you a contemporary example. One of the arguments that advisors close to President Nawrocki, including the former head of the Bureau for National Security, Sławomir Cenckiewicz, but also others, voiced about the SAFE program, which is a EU program for military spending, is that the SAFE program could be blocked based on the rule of law conditionality mechanism, and could be blocked by the European Commission simply for political reasons. The moment a government that the European Commission does not like takes over in Poland. In the same way, the Recovery Fund was unblocked after Prime Minister Tusk took power, although nothing has changed. Not a single letter, not a single comma has changed in the Polish law. So this is something that, serious people who aren't in any way political fighters or gladiators are concerned with, me included. Okay, fourth, we need to invest in infrastructure. And if I would say one thing that I would really want my German colleagues to start thinking about ASAP, like right now, like in 5 minutes, is NPS, NATO pipeline system. Because we need to connect our gas pipeline system that we are already developing in Poland for military use, our military gas pipeline system to the NATO pipeline system. In order to do that, Germany would need to build connectors from Western Germany, where the system is developed, to Eastern Germany, through the former DDR, up to the Polish border. And we still don't see that happening anytime soon or fast enough. And this is absolutely necessary. Without this, a prolonged conflict might be a more difficult thing for us, because we might simply have fuel shortages, especially airplane fuel. And fifth, we need to understand that although we cannot rely solely on security provided by Washington, it is crucial for both countries, both Berlin and Warsaw, to keep Americans in for as long as possible, precisely because of the dates I told you. We expect Russia to try something maybe already in a year or 3 years from now. And we would need to have at least 6 years to prepare for that realistically, which means that without the Americans, we might not be able to handle the challenge, at least some Americans some of the time. And this is it's not a matter of being over-reliant or over-optimistic. It's a matter of necessity. And it doesn't really matter whether those troops are stationed in Poland or in Germany. We need to, it matters we would like to have as many of them as possible, of course, in Germany, but from the point of view of the security of NATO, the crucial thing is to keep as many Americans as possible on the continent, at least for the next decade. Of course, it's not our decision, but such are the necessities. Point number 6. We need to think about security holistically and include energy security. As long as Putin is in power and Russia does not reform its regime in some meaningful way, Russian oil and gas are not safe, and they might be used for political blackmail. And of course, I completely understand why Germany is, where there are political forces, there are political voices in Germany interested in returning to energy deals with Russia. I understand the motives. My ability to influence German thinking about this problem is limited, but we need to. But I need to speak about the security. And finally, point number 7: we need to build robust cooperation with non-EU allies other than the United States. Another criticism of the already mentioned European SAFE program is that it does not allow for purchases of military equipment, for instance, from Turkey, which has great drone technology. Especially Turkey, I would single out as a key ally for the security of the Eastern flank that needs to be kept on board in as many programs as possible. Turkey is said to have one of the largest, if not the most capable, land armies in the alliance. So cooperation with Turkey is absolutely good on a whole number of issues. Again, in spite of different political considerations. The above 7 points, in my mind, present a spectrum of optimal Polish-German cooperation and security in the coming years. Of course, in practice, this cooperation will be far from perfect and filled with many rotten compromises. But this is what, in my opinion, we should aim. Thank you. So thank you so much. Right now, what we have planned for is, if someone wants coffee, someone wants something to drink, we might make a coffee, get something to drink.
First, I'd like to come back to the theory and Mackinder. Mackinder, in the beginning of 20th century, said something that today is really current, really actual, because heartland, so pivotal area, and this maritime area. And now I come back to practical things. Today there was a big conference in Canadian embassies and representatives from Irish Department of Foreign Affairs have discussed future of NATO. Of course, Ireland is not the subject here, but there are countries like Austria, Switzerland, or Ireland that never will join NATO, or there will probably never be any active members because they are small countries and neutrality is very, very traditional. But our countries, like the question of our seminar, is strategic partnership between Poland and Germany. And in today's discussion, I observed in your theoretical, what I come back to Mackinder, and in Dublin Canadian embassy, is that there are countries that have special responsibilities because of historical experience. Germany is number 1, Poland is number 2. So we are, why number 2 or number 1? Because Germany, because of the history in 1933 and so on, started the problem. But our responsibility is also there because we are the big old kingdom that failed to organize the Middle Eastern area of Europe. In 18th century, failed to do this. So we are also responsibility. We have also responsibility for rising of the bad habits of Prussian kingdom and later Kaisertum for Germany. So 2 middle big and very big countries have this responsibility in the future. What I think that will come soon will be big reform, and it comes from discussion from here of NATO and EU. we don't talk now about EU because it's economy mainly. We talk about security, and security is NATO. In NATO today, in observations of many embassies here, especially representatives from American embassy, who are the newcomers here, who are diplomats from new administration already, are signaling that until the procedures in NATO cannot be continued, because American taxpayers cannot understand why American taxpayers should pay for countries like Spain or like Britain, who reject bases and things that you know from press from recent conflict. So what I think, and this is the scientific discussion, I come back to 7 points of Dr. Kuj, and I dare to risk the thesis that we will have in this 2028-29, after the changes in France, in Poland, in England, in Germany, and in Germany. So 4 big countries of European Union in European continent will change. I don't know the outcome of American elections. We will have to wait. But in Europe, for sure, the feeling is that in France, there will be president who has big powers from the Rassemblement National. Recently, I was in Switzerland and France, and these cantons from French speakers and France, everybody I was talking is in favor of anti-migration, traditional values, and skeptical about Brussels. So in France, there will be change, probably in Poland too. There could be coalition government of several segments, very pro-American peace, very pro-liberal part of Konfederacja, and we don't know, but probably there will be shift of right in Poland. Probably there will be shift for right after the local elections, so Länder elections in Germany. So there will be stuff, and of course in England, nobody can exclude quicker elections than planned, because Nigel Farage was a shock for elites, and here in Ireland, that are neighbor of England, they say that Starmer will go, and probably the government will go. There will be earlier elections, and America and Trump favors Nigel Farage as prime minister. So we'll have new structure in Western countries. The big countries will be shifting right. Probably also Estonia coalition, as we call it in foreign affairs in Poland, Estonia coalition, so blue-black, maybe not with Mrs. Weidel as chancellor, but Jens Spahn as chancellor and she deputy, or maybe she chancellor and him deputy, Austrian variant of Jörg Haider. Could be, could be not, but the shift is for sure. AfD and the right politicians have good contacts to Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and Trump. France's movement has great contacts to MAGA. In Poland, PiS has good contacts to America. So there is not to exclude that the big reform of NATO could come, and new global NATO or new NATO could arise, or could be within this NATO, with expanding the maritime countries into this global NATO. Which are maritime countries? And the 3 pillars of the conflict Dr. Kush mentioned. The 3 pillars are Pacific, Middle East, and Central Eastern Europe. And thanks God, we have this defended democracy in, thanks America, not only God, but thanks America, thanks Biden, and thanks generally American states, Ukrainian is defended. Also thanks to the nation, brave nation of Ukraine. So we could theoretically have new dynamics in NATO that could expand not NATO, but create new NATO within the old structure, having inside Ukraine, and having inside the Israel, and having inside Japan and South Korea. Why Japan, South Korea? Because of Pacific theater. Why Israel and allies from the Gulf? So small Gulf countries like Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait, and Israel, and also Moldova and Ukraine, and Poland actively playing important role. Then immediately comes the question for Germany: would they join the new global NATO within the NATO or not? And answer is probably yes, because of the historical responsibility. Because nobody will reject responsibility for history 100 years after what happened in 30s in Germany. Germany cannot avoid responsibility and avoid soldiers to stabilize Middle East. What about Poland and Ukraine? To Ukraine, probably Americans will say, if you want to be defended versus Russia, you have to send soldiers and defend Israel because of Iran threat. It is scientific discussion. It is what I hear from diplomats. I did mistake, and I finish now, when I said to our discussions in November that few weeks and Iran is gone. Really, I say sorry. I didn't appreciate enough the power of the old empire and the old structure of Iran, but the war is on. Iran is the only small, medium-sized enemy from America and big enemy of Israel that before settlement of the new world after 30s, when the peace will reign and two big powers, China and America, will divide world into two parts, Iran should go. Iran of mullahs should go. And Israel has expectations. American voters have expectations who support MAGA and who support Republican Party. So my feeling is that there will be reform of NATO, and Poland and Germany should play important role. Maybe Poland not sending troops, but stabilizing transport routes. Germany selling and giving for free ammunition and things to the Middle East conflict to Israel, and America guaranteeing us not being attacked from the heartland, because the heartland axis would be, of course, Russia, China, and Iran, who is the next small, medium-sized enemy. Chaotically, but I started the maybe eccentric views that I really hear from diplomat from France. Today, the French diplomat told me, congratulate Poland foreign policy because you have good contact to Trump. No leader from Western countries, from big countries, not Starmer, not Merz, and not Macron have such a good contacts to Trump. Poland is smaller than France or Germany, but this saves us from bad reaction from Americans to Europe. So it saves us to have soldiers from America on our soil. And the transformation of Zelensky. Zelensky at the beginning was the not very big friend of Mr. Trump. Now he follows his policy and he says America is great, Trump is my friend. So finishing, I say, is the strategic partnership with Poland and Germany crucial? Yes, it is. It will be crucial in new NATO, in new global NATO.
When I look at the agenda, we envisioned that the first part of the discussion, an hour or so, would be devoted to short position statements that could be longer than just a question or a short introduction, and short position statements by each of the participants who wishes to do so. I mean, we did discuss a little bit of SAFE, and I know that Dr. Schulz is responsible for a analysis concerning that program and Polish security.
Yes, thank you very much. But I would like to put it in the bigger picture. Firstly, to address some points to your presentations, and then as also as a part of my opinion, also to say some sentences about SAFE. Because the question of our meeting is Is the strategic partnership between Poland and Germany crucial for the security of Central and Eastern Europe? And it is with question marks. And I must say that after the presentations, I would answer no. I would answer no. It is not German. Poland and German cooperation is not crucial for the security of Central and Eastern Europe. It would be wishful, but there are many circumstances which speak at the moment against the investment of much energy and financial means into developing of it. Because I would like to refer to your 3 points, and for me, the most realistic, first I would say the most important issue from our perspective is to strengthen the eastern flank. And now is the question, what kind of measurements are useful. And I think what you suggested, or what you presented as the third kind of alliance, this Nordic Eastern, between these Nordic Eastern countries, with Germany or without, but Germany will be very supportive, but it's not indispensable in this coalition. That is really very realistic scenario, and also I think Poland is also very active in this direction with this Bucharest 9 and so on and so on. There are many initiatives, you know them. And what is our what are our concerns? That is this scenario what you call this Colby or NATO 3, where there's really the wish or such a tendency also from the American partners to transfer more power and more responsibility, especially to Germany. And I think it is positive that Germany takes this responsibility and invests much more in its military power. But the problem, I think, which we have, but not only Poland, but also France and so on, it's how to say, the problem lies in the concept, or the strategic concept, or in the mindset. It is not clear how Germany defines this security, what kind of security, how to say, no, yes.
What the goal of the German?
What the concept of security?
What's the idea of war?
Yes, idea of war and idea of the security. What is behind it? Because we have these historical experiences, and it was so in the history that this control, this power over Central Eastern Europe was a kind of leverage for both, for Germany and Russia. And I think it is still so, to some degree. And there are also some structures, we discussed it already, economic and so on, which are very supportive for this special relation between Germany and Russia. And from the Polish perspective, it is also a big problem when the relations between Berlin and Moscow are much bigger or much dense or how to say, closer than between Berlin and Warsaw. And we see now, okay, it has changed partly, but we see how difficult it is to build up good relations between also Berlin and Warsaw. And what is also, perhaps I will come back now to this SAFE program. Why it is so problematic for the part of the Polish society? Because it is this model of cooperation which is so very vertical, that it relies on dependencies which do not strengthen the resilience of Polish economy or Polish military forces, but they are used for other aims. They are, from the perspective of Germany or France, very attractive, but they are not so supportive for the from the perspective of Poland. We have this consensus that Poland will accumulate debts to purchase defense systems without developing their own industrial basis in order to repay these debts. And it is very unsustainable. It can be very unsustainable, but I think this conditionality, which is part of this program, allows us to assume that it will be, it can cause all these problems with indebtedness and so on. And therefore, yes, that's really the conclusion which I had from your presentation. If we really want to strengthen this Eastern flank, we have to develop their own capabilities, military, economic, and so on capabilities. It is nice if we can cooperate, but in this horizontal way, not always to build these dependencies which make us more vulnerable to the crisis. And therefore, I would say after this, I also had these question marks here, but after your presentations, I'm convinced that this scenario, the best scenario for Poland would be to build up these Nordic Eastern alliances with countries which in a similar way which have the similar mindset and opinion about the dangers. And you mentioned that Germany is mostly interested in cooperation with France. There is no such big support in the political elites also for this engagement in the Eastern countries, even if this defense strategy which was published, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. It is mentioned, Eastern flank isn't mentioned. And
Poland isn't.
So?
Poland isn't mentioned.
Poland, but also Eastern Poland, but Eastern flank, because they mentioned that dangers in the Southern Europe, dangers connected with Africa countries and so on. Also, this rules and so and yes, all these dangerous terrorists, but Eastern flank isn't mentioned. And from our perspective, it's really, I would say, okay, because of the English, because perhaps it is a little rude or collaborative, it shouldn't be, but it is, German is not mature enough to take this leader position for our region. It is not developed enough military, but also politically, and therefore I think the US is indispensable for us.
Is the US mature enough?
I think so. I think so, because I do not. I think there was a problem of this free riding at the cost of United States in Europe, and they offered the security, not only military security, also financial security, and so on. They offered really a framework, and now they want that we pay for that. But they still offer this framework. I think so.
Okay, so if I may. So thank you very much for from the very beginning, because it's the first two speeches showed the very good general overview of current security situation in Europe, and put in the most important things were put in order. So that's thank you very much. Starting with my opinion. So starting with what was said by Michał, I can imagine much worse scenario that you showed us. This much worse scenario, which is very realistic in my opinion, this is the shift of alliances. Because if it will be the conflict between China and military conflict between China and the United States, I can imagine a situation then that Russia will change the sides. Because this is not the kind of, like, let's say, long-term ideological alliance between China and Russia. We have to keep it in mind. This is the very opportunistic, cynical one. They hate each other, Russians and Chinese, there's no doubt about this. And right now we have a situation that we have this kind of support from China to Russia, but in the meantime, the China is selling also the parts for the drones, for example, for Ukrainians. So that doesn't mean that they don't submit the parts for production of drones to Ukraine, because Ukraine is using, because they are much cheaper than Western ones. So I can imagine the situation if, for example, even like 10 years from now, that Russia will be indispensable ally for America against China. And the price for this could be our part of Europe. The price for this could be also the Eastern Europe and Poland, giving the priorities of interests for Russia in this part of the Europe, because we are in the historical situation. Then, for example, for my whole generation, because it was mentioned, so I was activist in the democratic opposition in the 80s or so, and we were raised in the positive shadow of the United States, because the United States was the freedom country. It was this. It wasn't this, definitely. But we cannot be sure that what was in the history will be in the future. So this, and I think that we in Poland, also in Europe, we underestimate the situation that the alliances can be changed, and that if the Pacific will be much more important for the United States, it is much more important. This change, even now, Trump is dreaming of this, because he is doing so many things in favor of Putin personally that it's even, I couldn't imagine this, that what he was doing in the last few months for Putin, ending with this, ceasefire for the celebration of the 9th of May, definitely, because without the involvement of Trump, it wouldn't be possible. So that's one thing. On the other hand, going further, for me, this is 100% that Americans will be decreasing their presence in Europe in terms of the military. It doesn't matter when a few thousand troops will be moved from Poland to Germany or Germany to Spain or from Spain to somewhere. It's not so important. Important is the thing that Americans will be decreasing their military presence in Europe. So, going further, the security issues will go back to the European hands. So I don't believe in this combination which was shown by Dr. Rosa that so Europeans, Ukrainians will go to support to Israel and then America will guarantee something in this one. It's not going to happen because firstly, I think that non-European country right now will be considering even sending the troops to the Middle East, for example. So because we have this opinion that we should do our part. I mean, in terms of the militarization of European countries, that this is the most important issue for Europe, and it will be going this way. So, going back a little bit, what is the most important change in European strategy policy after the full-scale invasion of Russia to Ukraine? What Dr. Ulrich Speck was mentioning at the very beginning of his speech, that this change in German and also in the France policy, because until the starting of this phase of war, for Germany and for France, special relationship with Russia was the very base of the security for Europe. This was kind of the second policy. First is NATO, and second for us, France and Germany, especially kind of relationship with Moscow. It was like this. It changed. I don't guarantee that we will be going for the future like for like 100 years, but we have this situation now. And what is the most important for security of our part of Europe is not believing in the future of guarantee of the United States, which is, I agree, this is very important just to keep Americans as long as possible and as strong as possible in Europe, no doubt about this. But this decision that American troops would withdraw from Europe doesn't depend on any kind of relationship, better or worse for countries, because this is a strategic move. And taking into account the challenges in the future for America, America does not see these challenges in guaranteeing the security of Europe. As simple as that. So that's what will be in the future, just because this is in the interest of the United States, just keeping the nuclear guarantees for Europe. Because in America, as far as possible, which is a very important thing, in the strategic terms, is the one of the most important security issues for the United States as it is. This is the nuclear non-proliferation, because any additional states which will keep nuclear weapon worsen the strategic position of the United States. So the Americans will keep their nuclear deterrence in Europe as a guarantee of their position. But in the conventional terms, I have no doubt that they are going to withdraw with the additional years, the American presence will be smaller. So I think that for the security of Europe, not only Poland, I think that this change which happened in the German and France, which the change which sees the Moscow as not a mean to the security, but a main threat for security of Germany and France, because this is this kind of situation. I believe that this is the mainstream of political thinking in Germany, that Russia is a threat not for the security of allies, but the security of Germans. And this is like this, which is for us in the center of Europe the very important thing. And but in my opinion, how the Germans and France they see it they see it through the, let's say, European aspect, which should show for every country of European Union what is the most important thing, that our cooperation as Europeans in terms of the political organization, which is kind of the European Union, which is mostly economical one, that's right. But if anything bad will happen in the European Union, the politics will go back to the worst scenarios in our history between the Poland, the German, and European also. So I think that this European perspective is very important, because this is the chance that still the German in France will see the Russia as a main threat to their security. Because if it will change, if it will go back to the history, it will be the worst scenario for Europe. So just keeping this thinking in Germany and France that Russia is a threat, not a mean as additional security. This is also the very important for us, for the countries in Central Europe. And I think that the good thing is to keep Germany involved in the questions of the security of Eastern Europe. And we have this scope of agreements between Germany and Ukraine, for example, in the last few days. And I think that this is not only this one example, but this is the way how we should work. So if Germany will be involved in the security of Eastern Europe, it will strengthen also the security of Poland, in my opinion. And that's the way how we should cooperate in the future. Especially I can repeat it constantly that American presence in Europe will be increasing, and that's one of the main points of our calculation in the security of Europe in the future.
Yeah. I think what I take, I mean, you said Germany is not necessary, but I agree with you. I think Polish leadership is crucial, and Poland is just the biggest country on the eastern flank, and it's up to Poland to bring those countries together. I was at the 3C summit in Dubrovnik, the business forum, and many people complained that the Poles didn't show up and said there is a lack of Polish leadership. But that's maybe it's a question of formats. I don't know. But I obviously also see that there are many formats, B9s or so on. So there's a lot going on. And we also, I think, have now a chance post Orban to bring also the southern part more into this. But I don't think it will be an alliance. It's just a joint understanding. And I think we need to be prepared for different scenarios. So also, you should not have only one type of war in mind, which is the NATO war. You should also think, each country should think, what happens if I have to fight alone? What happens if I have to fight with these neighbors and that neighbors? So we need to stay open and not to fixate our war planning on just one scenario. I think this is a big difference to the times when NATO was safe and everybody thought it would always be NATO. So we need to be flexible. We need coalitions. And I think Poland obviously has a leadership role. But I also think that, and I agree with you, the threat perception has very much changed in Germany. And we don't know about what happens in 50 or 100 years, but this is now set for, I would say, for a new generation. And then to have Germany on your side, look at Ukraine. Ukraine very much values the partnership with Germany because it gets a lot out of this money, industrial debts, arms, or something. So of course Ukraine could do this without Germany, but it's in a much better position with Germany on its side. So I think the same applies to other Eastern flank countries. So have Germany as a big industrial power behind you, supporting you, brings you just in a far better position. So yes, I would say, I mean, this is not vital, Vital in the new situation is that you have your own armed forces. That's the number one priority. And then it's vital to connect with, let's say, for you, maybe Finland, which has a very similar mindset of obviously the Baltic countries. I actually think we should have some kind of federation with the Baltic countries. And because they cannot defend themselves. And but it's up to you to figure out that. So Sweden.
No,
It's good to have these countries. So you have mass, you have scale. So I think you should aim for the broadest coalition possible. Obviously, Poland has a leadership role to play.
No, I wanted to say that Sweden had a vision of making Baltic an inner sea of a large Swedish-Polish empire. Unfortunately, deep religious divides within the Vasa family, among the Catholic Vasas and the Protestant Vasas, made that project unfeasible. It was never realized.
And we in Germany, we don't really like to remember Swedish incursions during the 30 years of war. But as we said also today, history is not necessarily a guide to the future. And where is the situation now?
What I would like only to add to what you said, I didn't want to say that we do not need Germany, but I think that now there's such an atmosphere of this perception that it costs a lot of work on both sides that we can make better cooperation and so on. And the same work and money, if we invest in these Nordic Eastern alliances, I think it brings us now more. And then Germany is also Russian alliance, and if they see there is something which has a chance and can develop and so on, that is interested in it. Now we see Germany is not interested, not in this Nordic alliance, that's not, but in this eastern flank. Even with Lithuania, it is not the best, it is not the driver of the development there. And perhaps it is rational from the perspective of Germany, but and I think the good cooperation between Poland and Germany can be a result of the process, but not at the beginning of the process, because it is not so fruitful.
I agree, but I would say we're just in the beginning. It is a completely new landscape, and we see that Germany and Poland are already closer because we don't have this division over Russia anymore. And we agree broadly, we have similar structures, maybe not the same. So this is something that often has been removed. It doesn't mean that we immediately agree, but we don't, Thomas Ilves, who always complained that you Germans, you didn't take us seriously. He said this to me very often. And
excuse me? Hello?
Just to finish this. So I think this divide, you Germans tell us we are just, we have a psychological problem because we're obsessed with Russia because of our Cold War history, and this is not the new Russia. So all this has gone, and I think it moves away a big obstacle in our relationship.
The question of if you have a chance to go back, let's say, just the question.
Jacek Rosa.
Excuse me, if it comes to security, we have to be, I really agree what Robert said, but we have to be realistic. Realistic means that the only state that can guarantee security to Europe or to everybody of us in the Western world is America. There is a huge discrepancy. There's a huge discrepancy, and I don't see and hear in this discussion between the potential of America, military potential of America, and military potential of European countries. There is not such a thing like Europe. There is European Union. We Europeans. That does not exist. What exists is national armies of poor trained soldiers who are incapable to help anybody. If America does not help Ukraine and Polish government does not create the structures and Polish society helps Ukrainians and Ukrainians fight themselves, they will end up already in hands in 3 days in Russia hands. So being realistic, we have to really come back to realism and ask and beg Americans to stay in Europe. If they don't want to stay in European continent, we Poles will trade with them to stay on territory of Poland, in Rzeszów, or in Fort Trump, or wherever. Because for the window of opportunity, I agree with Robert. Russia will change, but it will happen when the conflict America-China is there. Till the conflict starts, we have window of opportunity 5 to 7 years, probably. Use this opportunity to draw soldiers to Finland, to Sweden, to Poland, my country, Poland, but also to other eastern flank, and make a fortress from American soldiers and business trading, what we can give back Americans. Money, they don't need money. Techniques, they don't need techniques, but they need infrastructure, maybe bases closer. Ramstein bases, this is a punishment for Germans. Starmer and Merz did big mistake in this conflict. Poland didn't, because we at least didn't comment. I know these new diplomats, they are really hardworking for American interests. And they ask me, what to hell is the business of keeping Poland or Germany safe? It's not our business, it's your business. And you are Europeans not ready. You won't be ready even in 50 years. So trade with us and be our customers, or we will leave you, as Robert said. So the scenario is one. Russia will turn aside, and if European countries, except of Poland, because I'm sure Poland will to trade with America. But if Germany or France does not trade, Russia is not interested in Western Europe. Russia is interested in this country. But if some countries of our region make the mistake to rely on Germany or France, they will be swollen by Russians. So the only way to escape is to beg Americans, please create fortress in Poland. So this is clear, but I like to point the things that I see in real terms.
Okay. No, I have answer, if I may, because I would agree with you, but I think this is not going to happen, because America doesn't see, even in these new global conflicts, which will happen in the future, America doesn't recognize the differences between the separate European states, because for this case they are too small, and Poland is not too small in order to play part in the global conflict, because we are as a one country, we are too weak. And I agree with you definitely that our security is based totally on the United States. But two things: we have to see it on the timeline. And for example, for the timeline, for the time being, this is very important to militarize the European countries. And for example, right now, in this year, 26, only one German company, Rheinmetall, will produce more 155 ammunition than America itself. And also the war in the Persian Gulf showed that America is ready to provide the war with such intensity only for 1 month. And America stopped this intensive phase of the fight with Iran, not only other reason than the scale of the ammunition usage.
But you just provided a reason for German-Polish cooperation because Poland is too small to be interesting for the United States. So Germany is not too small to be interesting as the third or first force.
But your government does mistake.
If you deal with what I call the Nordic Eastern Coalition, where Germany and Poland are together, and even Britain, and I would say, keep Western Europe out because they have different perspectives, interests. But if you bring those together, this would be a landing place for the Americans that is very interesting, that would block the advance of Russia and at the same time could serve as a European partner. So, but you need those two countries in this mix. So I think that would
just one last thing that this is the issue that we were weak as European countries, and actually we were awakened too late because the European countries weren't being awakened in the spring of 22. It should happen the same. But for Germany and France, they changed their security policy just 2 years ago. So it took 2 years of this Russian-Ukrainian war just to realize the new reality. But still, for the right now, that's right. We are without Americans. We are, weak and not able to fight with Russia, for example. But this is our responsibility to build these capabilities for the next few years, just to be ready for this. And really, just one thing. And I think that with the Russia, it's not only because it was this report that in technical terms, the European economy can be capable to build the military capabilities against the Russia, but the will is very important. For example, what is the biggest, let's say, the strength of Russia now? Not because of the military capacity. The Russian strength is I know that what I'm saying right now is horrible. But Russian strength right now is that they are ready to put 100,000 people to death just to terrorize other countries. This is the biggest advantage of Russia right now, not military capabilities. And the question is whether the other European countries will be ready to support Estonia, for example, when the 100 Russian soldiers put to death will invade this country. This is the kind of the right now the real military risk from the part of Russia.
I mean, in this context, I have at least two questions to our INSA, our researchers. Because what emerged into discussion, one, a statement that Ulrich Speck made is that the obstacle in Polish-German relations, which was the attitude towards Russia, is gone. Now, this is a strong statement. So the first statement, your research. Do you see a changing attitude towards Russia among the Germans and among the Austrians? And it's very, very nice to have someone from inside Austria, because Austria is also important in that respect. Also, Austria might not be a big country, but geopolitically it's crucial. It's crucial for the it was a crucial nodal point for the transfer of Russian resources to Europe, and one of the important points on the map of Russian influence in Europe, let's be frank. So this is one question, and the other question. Well, this is something that Robert Kuraszkiewicz said, that we need to work on remilitarizing European countries. Now, easier said than done, even in the case of Germany, because remilitarization is not just about producing munition, it's also about attitudes, it's also about building an army. And, people who have worked in the military or in military intelligence, like, for instance, the vice chief of the Bureau for National Security General General Kowalski, he made this public statement when he was asked to comment about German plans to build a large army. So his comment on this was that, public comment was that he's concerned to what extent you can make a society that did not value military service highly capable of raising an army that will be ready to fight within a couple of years. There are certain psychological factors. There are certain factors connected with the ability and readiness to use military in lethal combat, in potentially lethal combat for some soldiers. I mean, it's a huge psychological shift. I mean, there are multiple historical examples, including going all the way back to ancient examples where military commanders on the eve of the great battle talk to their soldiers and say, some of us who are here today will not be here tomorrow. And this is a huge psychological shift for the whole society to start thinking about military in that way. Has this happened in Germany? So basically I have two questions. How have German and Austrian attitudes changed towards Russia? And how have German attitudes changed towards military service?
I would like to start with the first question. And I will speak for Austria, but we conducted some surveys about this topic in Germany. And first of all, you have to consider that in Germany, there is like an invisible border. We have the west part of Germany and the east part. And of course, the east part is more critical to the US and more open to Russia. But of course, with the Russian invasion, we can see that this part of, that in Germany, the majority is more critical to Russia than we can, we could consider a development through this invasion of Russia. But I have to say that probably in Austria the situation is similar, but we have no numbers, no surveys.
Can I ask? Of course, when people think about voting for AfD, what is driving them, or isn't the strong, pro-Russia attitude? Is this a problem for them, or do they only consider domestic questions? Does it matter, or does they vote for AfD because they are pro-Russia, or despite? Does it matter to them?
Good and interesting question. In Eastern Germany, we have to see it matters because of this pro-Russian attitude, the people vote for the AfD. Because you can see it, a good example is also BSW in Eastern Germany, that BSW was much stronger in the eastern part of Germany in comparison to the western part of Germany. That is, of course, in the eastern part, yes, but then the comparison to the western part of Germany, and then the western part is completely different. In the western part, this pro-Russian attitude, it's not a good position to get more.
It's not central for this image of AfD.
But also you have to see in the AfD, there are different positions because the Western politicians are also in this topic different in comparison to the Eastern politicians, right? But I have to say in the Eastern part, it matters, and the AfD profits because of this position.
But I have a question. Can you recognize from these researchers in this eastern part, they do not have problem with the war or Putin or aggression, or it is more this anti-Western or it is also some kind this against this transformation. It is more against West or less pro Russia and pro Putin, because it is very how to say. Many say Poland or Eastern Europe is so against Russia because of experiences of the socialist period. And now in Eastern Germany they say they are pro-Russia because of the socialist period.
Also Hungary. I always say the Eastern Germany goes not the Polish way, but the Hungarian way.
Yeah, and therefore it is pro Putin, or it is anti-West.
Do you have the research on this?
I wouldn't say it is pro. When we conduct the surveys, we often, I think even every week, we ask what are the main topics. And the main topic, I wouldn't say is not pro-Russia or against Russia. I have to say yes. In the Western part, the majority sees Russia as an enemy, and in the East Germany it is like this. But the topic peace, which is really helpful for BSA. This is acting with the peace or diplomacy. That's the point, I would say. And that's what we conducted. This topic was really helpful.
How high is this on the agenda? Is
It depends.
Migration number one, economy number
depends.
one, peace number one?
Depends. In Germany, for example, last election, 2 or 3 weeks before the election here for the parliament, the topic number one was peace. Then we had the terroristic, was it Solingen? Terrorist ethic in Solingen, and the I think migration was on top again. That helped. CDU wasn't that good for BSV, but the main topic is always peace in East Germany, and I think that's the. I wouldn't say they are so pro Russia, but and the first thing is also the way how am I staying financially. That's the typical thing. What we want for our interest, the Russian gas. Okay, they made this war. Okay, that's bad. But in the end, we have to think about our own interests. And I think that's the main thing.
That's a good point. Maybe from one point of view, the most important question for this afternoon, let's say, because there's quite real possibility that, for example, they will come to the power in the German. And you see this, let's say,
if I'm going to go out on them, and I know this is recorded, I'm saying this is purely my personal point of view, and I'm saying this as a political scientist.
Okay. Yeah, but
It's inevitable.
So let's.
I mean, Grandma was kidding.
Let's say
I totally disagree.
Okay.
I think they will always be one third. There's a protest vote first. I think that you have two wings of the party that are not compatible.
But let me put my
And then you have all the establishment parties which will team up against Reagan. So I just don't see that they form a government. But maybe I'm wrong. But
Yeah.
it's
But so maybe I put it maybe personally in the wrong direction. So let's say we put it larger. Do you see and what it would have to be this way of changing this position from the German side in the next 2 years toward that it's a chance, is it a real chance to go back to this, let's say, this seeing Russia as an additional point of security for Europe thanks to this German relationship?
you want to say something?
I you don't have the rest for this.
I think this is not, you never know, of course. But you can also say there's Konfederacja, there's also a pro-Russian party in Poland. It can also grow to 20%. Who knows? But I think this the consensus is now very much for Ukraine. You also have factors such as more than 1 million of Ukrainians. So every class has Ukrainian pupils. So we share the story of Ukraine. That's very much embedded now in Germany to be pro-Ukraine and to look at the conflict from the Ukrainian side. And on the other hand, what can Russia offer to us? Is it really cheap energy? Energy from Russia was never cheap. We always got a political price. We have other developments in the energy market. So if we take the energy side away, what can Russia offer to Germany?
Big market.
If we imagine Germany would now team up with Russia, it would have all the Central Europeans against the Nordics, the Finns. We are embedded in the European consensus, and I just don't see a path away from that. So I would even also argue that in the French case, President Bartłomieja would also join the consensus, more or less. And we see him now taking a distance to AfD because there are those radical voices. So this is very much embedded in German thinking, German society. Of course, nobody can predict the future, but from where we are now.
There was a discussion what can offer Russia when it swings sides, because Russia is now on the side of China, but Russia has no insight, is a bankrupt country. What functions is only Moscow, Petersburg, and the resources that they export on poor prices to China. So Russia is not an important partner, but they are dangerous. And I agree again with Robert that he said, and it is really in our scenarios, that they will swing sides. And then when they see in Moscow that AfD and the right-wing parties like anti-European party in London, Nigel Farage will be next prime minister. So he is not very anti-Russian. He is anti-European. So Russia in future, when they swing sides, is the really danger that they will again ask for their old territories, starting with Baltics and Ukraine first, and then Baltics. So for us, there is a danger, and we have to work closely to AfD that will be in next government in Germany as a ruling party or as a junior party. We don't know, but there will be time. In 2 years' time, 3 years' time, is no way, if democracy functions, that in Germany AfD will rule. That's why now is the time to consult, and our Konfederacja politicians, some of peace politicians have good contacts. We, with Michał from our work in Berlin, we have our contacts. We know that it's really crucial and important, and I work as a diplomat, and our friends from Ministry of Foreign Affairs are working closely with AfD to telling them that there is no option that there is no option that import of gas should be number one. Gas that was not cheap, as you said, and still keeps the economy like on drag. Because if you have cheap gas, this renewable energy does not develop. If you have expensive gas now, renewable energy is now starting to develop, and also American gas and other resources from Middle East would come to Germany. So we have our job to do before the government changes in Germany, that we hope, together with American friends and with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, who are in favor of AfD, but they are not especially in favor of colonizing Europe by Russians. Americans want to have us, they don't want to give us to Russians. So crucial thing in our partnership is to convince AfD politicians and to communicate to the nation that to FPO in Austria or in Germany AfD, that anti-European or anti-systemic we can tolerate in Poland. So tolerate, we agree because we are not happy with Brussels in many things, but being so pro-Russian as many politicians are in AfD is unacceptable for us. But this is the platform of talks, of cooperation, of diplomatic discussion inside the European Parliament, and also discussions like this that we have now. There is a need of more talk shows inviting AfD politicians to explaining to them that this is a horror for Germany, because only good thing from Russian-German cooperation, good thing is kind of, it's like Hitler and Stalin divided Eastern Europe, and then we have the problem until now. So communicating to Germany that and this is not bad basis, because now I hear in German discussion that Russia is enemy as Mr. Speck with this Hasek novel. So Russians are bad. So really now it seems in radio and so that Russians are bad guys. It's not bad for Poland.
No. It's, I think just, and this reminded me of something that Robert said, and I wanted to, address this briefly. Robert Kuraszkiewicz said that, the worst scenario would be the switching of alliances. So this would be, so basically what you're referring to, if I'm correct, is the infamous or famous reversed Kissingers. So Henry Kissinger around 2008 said that the next US president, in order to contain China, has to cooperate with Russia in the same way. He had to cooperate with China in order to contain the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a great threat in the 70s. Now China is a great threat to American interests. So we have to do the reverse strategy. I think this is not a new threat. I mean, again, typical situation. We have a Polish-German conference, and it's basically about both fighting each other. So this guy, but I don't think this is that big of a threat for two reasons. First of all, not because Americans won't try it. No, not because I believe in the goodwill of Washington. No, I'm realistic. They've tried it. They've tried it since Obama. It's not just Trump that did this. Obama actually did more to do the reverse Kissinger strategy, in my opinion, than Trump did. You have the opening of Nord Stream. You have the infamous reset policies under Obama. That all happened. It's not just Trump. It's not just the Republican administration. It didn't work in the past, and it didn't work, in my opinion, for two reasons. First of all, I think at this point, Russian economy and politics has been tacitly, and technological life, has been tacitly penetrated by China to the extent that the deep state is no longer capable of making that decision. They're no longer as in control as they think they are. Because China simply has resources, has technology, has intelligence, and I'm putting forward a hypothesis that this is Russia is a junior partner, and junior partners have a limited scope of independence. So this is one thing. Another thing is that because of the regime similarity, Russian regime will have a tendency to cooperate closer with China and will be afraid of a Western alliance, even if this is an alliance with Trump. Simply because there's a reverse effect of democratic peace, and this is the Black Knight effect. So basically, Russians will always think that moving too close to the West will open them up to, Western media, Western think tanks, and so on and so forth. And this will infect Russia as as Konstantin Leontiev famously said, Russia is to be frozen or it will decompose. And in order to stop that decomposition, no, it's better to cover it with another authoritarian state. And this other, and then basically what I see in China is actually the Putinization of Chinese politics. Xi Jinping starts, we used to have a predictable technocratic regime, the country ran as if it was a firm, and now that's all gone. Xi is prolonging his terms of office. He's acting more and more like Putin and less like Deng Xiaoping. Yes. Yeah. So I the threat is there. Never say never, but I don't think it's
so that already it's pursued by the US. I mean, it's obvious. Trump, tried to kind of, work with Putin, but it led nowhere. It was this big campaign promise. I made peace in 24 hours, and it was going nowhere. So Russia is not cooperative, and Trump said it 1,000 times. I mean, he has no other Russia policy. That's his problem. But Russia is now a sideshow. I mean, it's all about the Middle East. Iran is the defining issue for his second term, and China is somewhere in the background. There's a kind of we agree to disagree moment between the US and China.
Let's make it easy.
But Russia is out of the picture, and I have to say, the US under Trump is squeezing Russia. Look at Armenia, Azerbaijan, look at TRIP, look at the corridor. I mean, and then you have the Central Asian leaders invited to the White House. So at the same time, there's kind of logic to the Trump administration, which is bigger than Trump. Trump will never formulate the policy, but there's an agreement. Scott Bessent, there's Mark Rubio, and this America First policy means that the whole world is America's sphere of influence now. It's not limited. It's not about dividing spheres of influence. So actually, Russia has problems in Africa. Russia has lost the Middle East. It's out of Syria. It's really big. The only venue to influence the Middle East is via Iran now. Otherwise, it has no partners in the Middle East anymore. And that against the backdrop of the Soviet Union, where Russia was really competing with the US in the Middle East. Out of Africa, first Russia kicked France out of Mali, and now it has the same fate as France. Less and less interest. I think in Libya it's not important anymore. So it has no footprint in this area, and then it also gets challenged in the South Caucasus, in Central Asia. So actually, the value of Russia is diminishing, and of course, Russia is also focused so much on Ukraine that it has no capacity to do anything else. So the Ukraine war is draining the Russian resources. Russia is losing power and also value as a partner for China and for others. So we see whether it's a conscious US policy or not, the US is actually diminishing the geopolitical standing of Russia these days.
In the results of this politics.
Sorry, I would like to return to your statement about these possibilities for Polish-German cooperation, for example, for the production of ammunition and so on. And I think it's really so, and you presented now this enormous work which is made by the United States, yes, to secure this influence spheres and so on. And I think that the United States, it's independent administration run by Republicans or Democrats, expect this deeper cooperation between Germany and Poland. Because if they would like that Germany takes more responsibility in Europe for managing this NATO and so on, without Poland and without this cooperation, it is hardly possible, I would say. And we have this problem that I think that's the problem, that we have the different visions of the cooperation. We supposed, yes, and we have many signs of it, that Germany has this vision, I use this word, this vertical vision, that we are part in this yes, in this big system, but Germany has this lead position, and we play a part in this without building our autonomous.
I się restartował. I to spotkanie dalej trwa. Ja próbuję teraz się połączyć. Do you hear me?
Jacek,
Więc jakby można było... I co? A pan by... Aha, 5 CG, 54 jest...
Okay, mute his microphone.
Okay, and you are very positive towards this cooperation and always in favor, but you know also these experts.
Ale ja ich nie słyszę, tych ludzi.
How strong it is this widespread or, okay, I would say no, but I'm interested in your opinion, and if it's really now realistic to think about such, because we have really problems with closer cooperation with Germany because of the years that we lost our how to say, autonomy, sovereignty, and so on and so on. It is something similar, like between Eastern and Western Germany. You know, this transformation was made so that they do not have this leading position. They do not decide.
You know what Anna Kwiatkowska once said on the.
Yes, I know.
What I think that is that Poland constantly underestimates its power, strength, and influence. I keep saying to Polish friends, the German position would be very different without you. It doesn't mean that Germany agrees with you, but the fact that you are there, that you take this position, that you are very strong often and make your points, forces us kind of, find a middle position, let's say, between France and Poland. That's the comfort zone for Germany. It's in between, it's in the middle. And without Poland often, pushing us and being frustrated and angry. Well, because Germany,
our West expected. Germany wants this leading position. We see we need to take more responsibility and so on and so on. And okay, we can make our work that we deliver something and so on. But you also Germany can make this work.
It would be desirable, but that's not how it works. Germany is an unstrategic country. Germany is a big economy who is, trying now to build up its geopolitical military identity, but hasn't yet found a way. The new strategy, for example, still assumes that we fight as part of NATO, and there's no vision of an independent armed forces. Poland is a strategic country because you have been forced to, for historic reasons, you have been divided, you have been weakened by neighbors. So you emerge now as a very strong, powerful nation with a vision for your energy security, for your overall security. Poland has this, and it's fantastic, and it also helps very much to have this fantastic conversation here where you all disagree, but you have all the position, and that's if you go to Berlin, often people just repeat the mainstream ideas of the day. Because why? Because Germany has been built by the US in 1949. There was, for 4 years, there was no Germany. And then we have been built in a framework, in the US framework. And this has very much, we've always been embedded. I often compare Germany to Japan. Japan has been a very long time in a similar situation, but Japan is now taking a strategic leadership in its region, building coalitions with the Philippines, other countries. Also, interestingly, when we talk about history, Japan and South Korea, for many, many years, they had this historic grievances. And now, because the threat from China is becoming more acute, they just, forget about it and think about cooperation today because yesterday is history. So Japan has this. Germany still very much feels embedded in NATO, in the EU. And you see, for example, you saw Merz pushing for using Russian frozen assets to give them to Ukraine. He even wrote an op-ed in the FT, and I thought, wow, the chancellor is writing an op-ed. He must be very sure of himself. But then he went to the European Council and failed. Okay, then pity, and then what is our next point? So there is no real agenda as you have. So Germany has some direction, but it's looking for a kind of consensus inside the coalitions, alliances, inside the EU. France has a very strong vision of itself. Poland has a very strong vision. I'm just saying, not all countries are even the same. And in my view, it would be desirable if Germany had this vision of, being a leader in Central Europe, defending against Russia. All this, I think it's there. If you listen to Pistorius, there are people who have this vision, but you cannot always expect it to be there. So we kind of need your help as well. So engage with Germany. And I often hear frustration from Warsaw, but you need to knock on the door, you need to make the case. I think you have an interest. Yes, we have it too. And yes, we should be much more open. We should see France and Poland on the same level as the key partners. This is slowly, we're moving in this direction. Poland is also becoming more stronger economic power, obviously, but we're not there. And but don't underestimate your capacity to act and also to move other countries around.
No, I have there's one question that sort of remained unanswered. Is Germany really remilitarizing also in the sense of the social attitudes towards the military? Because Ulrich is saying here that Germany lacks a vision. I think something's moving, something's changing. When even here in airport, we are looking at a tram. Airport has very nice tram system, and one of them was, German Bundeswehr, Open Green. So is this really changing?
Interesting. Financially, definitely, from the state, but the people, first, as you saw, it's not how they assume and how they hope, but new people in the Bundeswehr. A lot of people are saying, okay, well, we don't want war. Who wants war?
Still very
The biggest majority is against war, equal which political party.
Thanks very much.
But I think
So, may I? Do you hear me?
only one second, because in Germany you started to discuss or even to introduce some kind of conscription, yes. And in Poland, we do not know how the society would react if we start to speak about conscription. And then we can say, okay, we are all prepared and so. But I'm not so sure how it was 1/3 of the young generation is against, yes, protested and so on. It was said that there were some protests against this.
Because of the law.
Yes, because of the law.
Right.
that they have now to answer
Right.
and so on. And in Poland, we do not know exactly. And I think they do not speak about this political practice, because they know it is very appropriate.
And when this came up, a big protest from all different political sides came up. So that's right.
But I think that in Poland we have this process of registration of the young people and this qualification for the this group of people ready to legal service throughout. So it's in this area we're one step ahead, because every young man saying I'm sure about woman has to go to that office and register their capabilities to potential service.
But in Germany, it's the same.
I think it's not. So that's this is the law which was introduced last few months, because this is the law which has to young men have to register in the military office until this year. Just register.
Just register.
Yeah.
Yes.
Without any consequences.
Yeah. So we have the same.
May I comment? Do you hear me?
Ah, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Because you mentioned about peaceful society and the feelings about peace. The same happens here in Ireland, but the difference between Germany and Ireland is that here they are 1,200 kilometers from eastern border, and you are very close. So Ireland or Holland or even Portugal can be peaceful. And what I hear, I understand that the Eastern German society from a former GDR, as well as in the West, generally, German society is very peaceful after the Second World War. I can understand this. But it shows again to people from Ukraine, from Poland, from Slovakia, or from Czech, or from Finland and Baltics, that we have to defend on our own means, because Polish politicians from PiS and Konfederacja, they ask themselves the question, also from PO, from governing party, if the war starts against Russia, who would be the first to defend us? And if the society in Germany or France is very peaceful, that I can understand, this is the argument that the only is us ourselves, like Switzerland or Finland, having great army and military service, to make Russia army difficult and really problematic to invade us. Finland in 1940, the example, or Switzerland today, they have really army that works, or Israel that works. So we have to build our own capabilities. We understand this, and probably conscription will be compulsory in Poland soon. Other way, there is no way. And second, you have the answer why Poles are so pro-American. Because peaceful society in Western Europe will never die for Gdansk.
And the GIs will?
And will Americans die for Gdansk?
For Gdańsk, I say, because there was a proverb, right? Because the problem is technical. Coincident bad luck is that every week there is a upgrade, and now it happened. So I called the technicians, and they say something is wrong with hearing. I can hear you very loudly, but I can something here. I just wanted to comment, because we are in a scientific discussion. It's a pleasure to be here every month to discuss different scenario. So President of Ireland 2 days ago said, I don't like NATO, I don't like military, because they kill each other and the emissions of CO from tanks are too high. So let's stop all the wars, because we will ruin our climate. President of this country, supported by Sinn Féin or by the government parties, very popular here. So Western Europe is still different from our part, and Germany, people from your profession understand this, but still communicating politicians from AfD and CDU to inform like Poles or Finns or Baltics have our own problems because we are on the border.
No, I had an interesting discussion. We share the discussion I had with my students when I compared the current situation in Europe and in Asia to the 1920s, 1930s, to the period before World War II. So what we've realized is, first of all, the whole point of gravity of global politics and economy has shifted towards Asia, which means that, roughly speaking, we can think of China being where the Soviet Union was, Russia being where Nazi Germany was, and Germany being where France was in the East. And you really see that because, when we talk with Germany about security, we pose, we have some of the same problems we used to have, the second Polish republics used to have in France about security. So too pacifistic, a bit reluctant to engage, not willing to take preemptive action, which is what Piłsudski famously proposed. So after Hitler's rise to power, so this is something of a history repeating itself, and unfortunately not necessarily as a farce like Marx wanted it to repeat itself. So maybe one of the things that emerges from our discussion is that we would like to break the cycle and maybe get out of that 1920s, 1930s, maybe more so French mind frame into something different in that part of Europe. Yes.
So my conclusion of this discussion, and I think we have now a fluid situation where I call it the geopolitical age, where multilateralism and international organizations, alliances are still existent, but play less of a role, and where nation, state, war interests are coming back. So I think every country in this new environment must have its own national strategy of survival and strengths, and look first how to build national strengths before looking towards others. In the past, in the last 30 years, after the Cold War, we had the era of globalization, where basically we had no enemies, or thought we had no enemies, no great power conflict, and we could just rely on this international frameworks from the World Bank to NATO or whatever there was. And now we're back in this shark tank, and so you need to be a shark to survive. You need to build your national strengths first, and then, let's say, in the case of Poland, I think you have different sets of partnerships. You have the transatlantic partnership, where the US is dominant, then you have the European partnership, and then you have your regional partnership. And I would build it as different rings of partnership, and where in no case you can be sure to get support in an emergency, but where you hope and build mechanisms so that the likelihood of not facing your enemy alone is just growing, because maybe the transatlantic alliance will work, maybe Germany or even the European framework can also support you, maybe the regional alliance will work. So I think this is just the difference, and we need new strategies that focus on our own strengths first.
My conclusion is also what Mr. Speck said, that Poland shouldn't underestimate its power, and feels also responsible for for the region or for the security issues, not only as follower of others, but also has to create these alliances and facts. And if we, yes, our institute has also strategy towards Germany, and the best strategy is to create facts, and Germany will join us.
Exactly.
Other voices?
Yeah, they are the good points.
Because that's not like we stop with, you know, it's like the last round of
You may just I think that we need more talks, more meetings, more exchange of view between the Poles and Germans. I absolutely agree. On different levels.
I go to Warsaw next week.
who's inviting you? Are you interested in going?
This is, I think it was Prison. We had 2 years ago already a workshop.
Oh yes, I know that.
This is the ESO Foundation.
It's like I know they have a big conference, peace and consider conference coming up. So,
Michał, may I ask our German friends, one of you, is it realistic, because sometimes we discuss it in Foreign Office, is it realistic to convince majority of AfD voters to be more Russia skeptic? Or
okay, let me rephrase next program. What we see with AfD is what I would call, and here's my German kicking in, Drang nach Westen. So AfD started in the east and now it's marching west. And from what you say, I would venture to think that as it marches west, it would probably have to balance its Eastern pro-Russianness with the necessity to appeal to Western voters.
I think they don't have a real vision and they don't have a strategy. So sometimes they move east, and then sometimes they move MAGA, and then they forbid visits in Moscow and all want to go to the US, and now they're kind of disappointed with the US. So they're struggling with finding a mental framework how to see the world and how to make sense. They're pretty much lost, I would say. So they're open for kind of radical fringes, but
as far as
the Brandmauer is of course very strong. But if in case it falls, all I can imagine is the AfD is a junior partner of CDU. I think CSU would never go with AfD as it is, as a junior partner in the coalition. So that's that. But if
never say never. You are German, but
even Jens Spahn wouldn't do that. If it would enter as a senior partner, I think AfD would have to basically sign up to the main frameworks. Now, this coalition would become more economically liberal. Yes,
I just realized that.
But it wouldn't move towards a big pro-Russian German government.
I have to say this. It just jumped into my head and worked in me, and I know we called it, and I'm being a bit facetious. But imagine this: if you have Alice Weidel, if you have Jens Spahn as chancellor and Alice Weidel as vice chancellor, then you would have the most LGBTQ friendly government.
yes, this is this.
So that would be an achievement.
Yeah, of course, if the Eastern wing, if the Eastern pro-Russian wing, right, radical, if they would become, a minister for infrastructure or whatever, I think you could somehow bury this. But to govern, you need to be part of the mainstream in Germany. Germany is not like Poland or the US or Britain, a system where you have two more or less radical wings. And as you know, it's still centrist. And so I think the mainstream has changed. I cannot, nobody can foresee what happens in 20 or 10 years. But as long as this war keeps on, and I would also argue Europe as a whole has very much changed. The neighborhood has changed. Where are the countries that the German industry or German economy is more dependent than on China is Central Europe. So we cannot offend our economic partners as well. So everything that brings us together, economic, energy, political partnerships, that helps bring the German also in a more polished mindset.
Let's be frank.
So you need to take over Germany.
I have the question. Do you make also researches about this attitude towards Poland or about this German-Polish cooperation and so on? Such
I think it needs somebody who's interested in this, then we could do it.
we have to pay.
How do we do this? German Highway Bauwette, we do this every year. But for Poland,
Due to German Hungary, because
Yes.
of course, Darmstadt, Deutsches Poland is Darmstadt is making the German Polish government, and they're making German Hungarian.
that is right within that institute.
They do what's called the
Infratestima. Infratestima.
Intertesting. Okay.
So, it is all.
So
You start with.
okay. So Polish-German conversations usually end with a conclusion that sometimes arguments in old marriages end. So the conclusion is that it's different. It's never been easy. But we need
I have another idea in my cousin here. It's okay. We may not, love each other every day, but we have children, and we need to take care of.
yes,
Well,
we have
it's not just about us; it's about the region.
we have shared interests and responsibilities in the region, and we need to take them seriously in those uncertain times. And I think we had a very fruitful exchange where we highlighted some very important points of similarities, difference, and we had a look at